Welcome to All Things Missing and Lost, and this is episode 6. In this channel, we explore all things that have gone missing and lost, whether people, places, or even vehicles. Some of them found, some of them never found ever again. And before we go any further, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Today we're talking about a tragedy that took place on the 13th of November 1985 in Colombia. It's known as the Armero tragedy. It occurred when the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted, and its resultant lava flow melted the glaciers and sent a huge, massive mud flow, also known as a lahar, that buried the town below. It was a catastrophe that killed over 23,000 people because the authorities had failed to evacuate the area successfully, despite being warned of the danger by volcanologists. Armero as a town was never rebuilt and remains a ghost town today, and the event is one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in history. You see, Armero was a prominent farming town before the eruption, and it was responsible for about 1/5 of Colombia's rice production and a large share of the cotton, sorghum, and coffee crops. Much of its prosperity was attributed to the Nevado del Ruiz volcano, because you see, being a volcano, its slopes had fertile volcanic soil that stimulates agricultural growth. So despite the danger of living close to the volcano, people still took the risk anyways, in order to reap that agricultural harvest. The Nevado del Ruiz stratovolcano existed in Tolima, Colombia, and in 1985 it finally erupted after 69 years of dormancy. This caught the nearby towns unprepared, even though volcanic organizations had warned the government previously to evacuate the area when they detected volcanic activity increasing just 2 months prior to the tragedy. You see, in late 1984, the geologists noticed that the seismic activity had begun to increase in the area around the Nevado del Ruiz. Increased fumarole activity, deposition of sulfur on the summit of the volcano, and phreatic eruptions also alerted the geologists that there was a danger of it erupting soon. By November 1985, volcanic activity again increased as magma neared the surface, and there were increasing quantities of gases that were rich in sulfur dioxide and elemental sulfur, and these began to appear in the volcano. The water content of the fumaroles gases decreased, and the water springs in the vicinity of the ruins became enriched with magnesium, calcium, and potassium, all of which were signs that these were leaching from the magma itself. So the geologists and other experts had warned the authorities and the media outlets about the danger in the weeks and days leading up to the eruption. Hazard maps for the vicinity were prepared, but these were not successfully distributed and widespreadly distributed. On the day of the eruption, several evacuation attempts were made, but a severe storm restricted communications, and many victims stayed in their houses as they had been instructed, believing that the eruption had ended. The noise of the ongoing storm may also have prevented the people from hearing the sound of the eruption until it was too late. Well, on that fateful day itself, at 9:09 p.m. on November 13, 1985, the Nevado del Ruiz ejected daxitic tephra more than 30 kilometers into the atmosphere, and the total mass of the erupted material, including the magma, was actually 35 million metric tons. That was quite a lot. The eruption produced pyroclastic flows that melted the mountain summit glaciers and caused all kinds of snow to melt into the waters, and there was a huge water flow flowing down the slopes. It now generated mud flows. Now, mud flows are like landslides, but it's huge, thick flows of mud. In fact, there were 4 thick lahars, these mud flows also known as lahars, that raced down the river valley on the volcano's flanks. They ran at the speed of about 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles per hour, and it dislodged rock and destroyed vegetation as it came down. After descending thousands of meters down the side of the volcano, the lahars followed the 6 river valleys leading from the volcano, where they grew to almost now 4 times their original volumes. You see, it's picking up debris, mud, and all kinds of things as it flows down the volcano. So it starts to get thicker and thicker. The lahars picked up speed in the gullies and eventually engulfed the entire town of Armero, killing almost all of its 29,000 inhabitants. You see, volcanic ash had been falling throughout the day, but the residents were again, as I said, informed that it was nothing to worry about. Later in the afternoon, the ash began falling again after a period of quiet, and local radio stations in fact reported that the residents should remain calm and ignore the material. One survivor reported going to the fire department and then being informed by the fire department that the ash was nothing. It was all played down and their guard was completely off. During the night, the electrical power suddenly went off and the radios went silent, and just before 11:30 p.m., a huge stream of water swept through Armero. It was powerful enough to flip cars and pick up people, and a loud roar could be heard from the mountain. But the residents panicked, thinking that a flood was about to come, but it was much worse than a flood. It was mud flow. At 11:30 p.m., the first lahar or mud flow hit, followed shortly by the others, and one of the lahars eventually erased Armero. 3/4 of the town's inhabitants were killed. The relief efforts of the rescuer who came later on was hindered because of the thickness of the mud, which made it impossible to move through without becoming stuck. By the time the relief workers actually reached the town, it would be 12 hours after eruption. By then, many of the victims with serious injuries were dead, and the relief workers were horrified by the landscape of fallen trees, disfigured human beings, and piles of debris from the entire houses. It was complete disaster. This was the second deadliest volcanic disaster of the 20th century, and it was only surpassed by the 1902 eruption of Mount Pili. The relief workers there were appalled at its impact. The lahar had left behind a large grey mass that covered the entire town, which was dotted with broken trees and disfigured bodies. Debris from the huts and the homes protruded from underneath the grey mud, and a few bags of crops were covered in mud, and the workers would describe only an acrid smell of rotting bodies, wood smoke, and decaying vegetables. And as they began to try to begin their relief efforts, scrambling, not knowing what to do, they started to hear some survivors letting out moans of pain and agony, but they would soon die from their wounds. The damages were assessed to be at $1 billion, an amount approximately 1/5 of Colombia's then 1985 gross national product. The destruction was immense. Could this have been avoided? Could the town not have been lost and lives not have been lost? Had the government done enough, or was the government hampered by poor distribution on the ground and poor efforts on the ground? Well, whatever we think might be the reason, it's a bit too late to find out. 29,000, almost 29,000 had died. Well, this is a great lesson and a reminder to us all never to take things too lightly and always be prepared for the worst. And also to always remain able to be in touch in the middle of a disaster, plugged into the latest news, plugged into the government agencies, in case we might need to hear what might be a much needed word of warning, so that we might be able to escape before things get too late. What do you think actually is to blame for the incident in Armero and the lives that were lost? Was it the government? Was it the poor efforts on the ground? Could this actually have been prevented, or really is it an unavoidable disaster? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and to subscribe.